Okay, we're live. Thanks for dialing in on the stream. I suspect the 31 people who said they were going to RSVP and come in person, some of you are actually behind the screen, and naughty you for saying you're going to come in person and not being here. We have about, I'm going to generously say 20 people. So it's not bad given that a lot of people are working from home these days. So thanks to everyone who joined, and for the, I can't see how many people are online, but I'm sure there's a good chunk of people who are dialing in online as well. And if you're listening to the recording, then that's good as well. So what I love about the talk we're going to have tonight is that it's not by someone who has is a product manager or a product owner, or has you don't even have product in your title, right? No. And so the great thing about the ProductTank meetups is that we listen and hear from people across the board. And the great thing about product is we engage with people who are in different roles, from founders to developers to salespeople to marketing people. And so we like to invite people from different parts of the product life cycle to come and talk to us and share stories and experiences that might help product people be better at what they do. And this talk, Prae and I talked about what she might want to talk about. She was keen to talk to the community. She's heard about ProductTank and thought you're a great bunch of people, which clearly you are. And so we talked about some of the journeys she's had around an event that she organized with a particular emphasis on accessibility. And the kind of the message in here is that with the best intentions to do the right thing, and we're all as product people trying to do the right thing in very challenging circumstances, it doesn't always go as we thought it might. And so Prae has generously agreed to share the story of having the best intentions and things not going according to plan. So thank you, Prae. And I'm going to leave the stage to you, and looking forward to it.
Awesome.
So, 20 people, I swear.
It's fine, we can add a sound effect in later. All right. Let me make sure the mouse is in the right place so that I can move right along. Okay, excellent. Well, that worked. Then I can just stay away from this thing. Whew. So the reason why the name of this talk is making bets and tricky decisions is because we did do bets. And as the three of us co-founders have no official product experience, we've been in tech for many years, but we just, none of us has ever held a product title. We've worked with product professionals, of course, as engineers or testers in our careers, but we've never need to set the whole program or do what the product people does themselves. Now, of course, when we have to create our own product, it's a whole different journey, right? Like, I mean, when you started out your product journey back in whenever day you first started, you would encounter some of these problems or concerns that we would have encountered, but perhaps maybe you were better equipped or have mentors or companies to hopefully help you through your journey. But if you didn't, well, come and enjoy the ride anyway. See how three engineers just stumble along and trying to find a way to create the best software event we could with what we had at the time. So since this is a story, we're going to make sure that we've introduced the characters, right? No, don't have to read the whole thing. We'll send this over, but doesn't matter. There's three co-founders altogether: Kemi, me, and Aaron. Now, this whole thing actually started with Kemi coming to me and go, oh, I've just hosted this New Zealand testing conference. You spoke at it. Aaron MC'd it. This was back in 2022. And go, I want to host something else, something a bit bigger, something that includes not just small niche group of testers, but maybe span across more people, more software, more inclusive. And so Kemi was like, right, she has experience hosting testing conference. She's hosted a few content of her own. So she did, I'm just hearing noises, so I'm going to turn that off soon. And she hosted Tech Engineering Lounge which is an interview series on her YouTube channel, just to testing out, just so that she can talk about her experience or someone else's experience around just software in general, just to see how things are going. So she started to dabble in that, but she wanted to do something bigger. And for me, I have actually, back in my university days, I hosted debate tournaments for kicks. So these are international events where we fly drunken young university people over to Thailand so that they can swim in our university lakes when they were drunk at midnight on the New Year's Eve. But we provide them with excellent accommodation and excellent Thai food along the way while they're debating the next day, while hopefully it's over. I haven't checked, but we'll see how it goes. But since I had those kind of like larger scale experience, but in Thailand, I was like, oh, I'm interested to see how that kind of scale or something a bit smaller might work in New Zealand and work to service the software crowd that has, I guess, brought me here to where I am today, 10 years after. And of course, I've always been involved in junior talent. So I used to host bootcamp at Samuel Tech. And so I'm like, okay, cool. If it's events, then I can find a way to either bring this together, bring mentors together with juniors or all that good stuff. So hopefully we could try a way to shape these events to help with what I care about in the tech software industry. So with Aaron, he actually has been involved in long-running conferences before this. He hosted WeTest conferences, which I think only ended recently or in the last 2-3 years also over the COVID kind of period. But they were running for 10 years, hosting events and conferences and workshops for testers. And so Aaron's bringing in heaps of experience, localized to New Zealand, most specifically Wellington specific, to our little group of people who are trying to do something a little bit different with the software industry. But looking at our collect experience, like each of us have at least 10 years experience in New Zealand tech industry. And so we've seen some problems. We've been to conferences. All of us actually spoke at different events. We spoke at small events like not small, but really nicely established events like Code Camp Wellington. That's a free event that's hosted here, or Trade Me. Another one is hosting in April, by the way. So please come over. We also spoke at other local meetups, the test meetups, the UX meetups, some of the not product meetups. I've never spoken to this group before, but a few other groups as well. And so we've seen a few issues and the diversity of these groups, depending where we go. We go to a more software engineering specific stuff. We see a skew towards certain type of people. We go to the design group. I see a skew towards certain type. And so in that case, how do we find a place to include the whole group in? How can we, as a software team, because product people will be a team, product managers will be a team, engineers, testers, designers, we all work on the same thing. We might not be in the same reporting line, but we work together. How can we create an event that the whole team could go together? And hence, we were trying to establish New Zealand Tech Rally. But of course, these characters have its own, not only do we have our own specialities, we also have very limited amount of time to spend. We all work 9 to 5 in our companies. I'm still at Xero. I was working at Xero at the time. Aaron was at Deloitte, and Kemi is still at BNZ. And we have bills to pay, right? We have a co-founder who has a family to feed with kids. We have another co-founder who have family of pets to also take care of. So we can't spend infinite of time coming out and doing all these events or doing more than what we can outside of our very draining 9 to 5 hours already. So this is the context and the resources we have. And when we started this whole thing, we bootstrap it all. So we budgeted so that, right, what is the break even of this event? This event that we're booking in, Victoria University, cheap, affordable, all good, max 300 people, minus the volunteer, so maybe sell 280 tickets or something along the line. And with that in mind, we're like, right, make sure the cost covers the whole thing. And so as we're working through all of this, right, we were like, okay, that's going straight to solution mode. So typical of us software engineers. Here's a venue, the date, here's the number of people, we're done, budget, gone. And we're like, no, let's take a step back. I've at least had some business background or marketing. Again, I was never a professional product person, but I have managed some of those or been involved in creating some of those previous events before. So I knew that at the minimum, we're starting a company. We want this to be a non-profit social enterprise. We wanted this to be a social enterprise because eventually we want to be able to, I guess, pay ourselves. Non-profit can pay themselves too, but we don't want to be tied in with the reporting obligations of a non-profit. And like, if we intend well and we keep the operation tight, 3 of us, and we stick to the New Zealand market and we serve the New Zealand software community, we can't really become the global money-making profit scheme. And I feel like being in New Zealand kind of in a way put a limitation, but also give us focus to serve this community. And so with that in mind, like, okay, cool, sure. But then there's other events around New Zealand that either disappeared that disappeared in the last couple of years because of COVID, right? So as COVID comes, some of those events, they were planning it, they paid deposit to the venue, it died. And so some of them haven't managed to come back up again. Well, the co-founders are tired now. They've realized, after COVID, they've been running these things for like 15 years. So either take a bit of a break or no, I'm going to stop this for a while. And hence a lot of conferences did die in 2022 or 2023. But they're coming back up again. So we're seeing a lot last year, though majority of them are still very much in Auckland. And so we were like, right, so we're all in Wellington. That's handy. And there's not many events in Wellington, not many established recurring one. Even when there is some, there are not many that are focused on that are not niche. We have like the KawaiiCon, very big software event for security people or people who cares about security, very successful, long established. But then again, it's been on pause. The co-founders is a bit tired. They're taking a bit of a break. But then that's still niche to a certain area. You wouldn't see many, product people going to the KawaiiCon, or you wouldn't see many managers going to KawaiiCon. It would just be people who are roughly interested most of the time. There are other similar events, but again, for DevOps, for cloud security, again, they're very specific to certain groups. So back to our thing of, what if the whole software team could go together? So we were trying to find a way to position ourselves, find our own little niche, right? That's the language we use here. And so we sit down and go, right, we're creating a business. It's not a non-profit, but we had to have a sort of mission. What differentiates us from people who are just organizing other community events? Because we're for-profit, but we're charging the kind of pricing that are very similar to other free community conferences. What sets us apart? What is different? Why are we here? Why not we just join up with those existing communities and expanded their product offering? We end up with, we have these values. We know that even with the community events that they've been hosted, we just don't have the diversity that we wanted. I mean, you look at me, I'm Thai, I'm from Thailand, a migrant. I've been in New Zealand long enough to pretty much be a Kiwi, but I can still straddle between the two cultures quite fluidly. Same as my co-founder, she's from India, very, very much cares about the woman equality, because where she's from, that wasn't quite a thing, at least in the area of the background that she has. So she cares very much about like, how do we make sure that when I come to these community, I see not just women and men, but the type profile or someone who looks more similar to her that they can identify with. But it's not just the attendees, but also the representations on the stage. Sometimes when you have community events or things that are free or like the things that are hosted, right? They cannot afford, or they maybe not have such a strong focus on creating that representation on stage. They go, we're thankful enough just getting community speakers to speak for an hour. These are probably software devs or people who don't public speak before. So I'm just happy to get anything. And they couldn't be choosy, or they're restricted by what they can do. And since that wasn't a part of their foundation of why they created the events, because they were serving specific things. They were serving the community, but they were serving community of people who do certain tools or do certain practice. And so the focus on diversity maybe not as strong. So that's also a main part of why or how we want to establish the company. So of course it sounds like I'm selling the company, which I kind of am, but at the same time, I'm also explaining this to you because these things that we care about and our values does become something that both define us and also restrict us, but also drive us towards certain decisions, as it will become evident in a few moments. So anyway, this is what we end up with. We end up with saying, right, if we're going to say all companies have a good mission, vision, whatever, right? So this is workshop to death by us amateurish humans who doesn't know much about branding. We try our best, but we go, right, for all the events that we're hosting under the umbrella of New Zealand Tech Rally, we want all of them to be inclusive spaces, or as inclusive as we could make it, to celebrate and connect and grow everybody else and all that good stuff. And so the values that I was explaining to you before, we've then kind of distilled them down to the categories that we really want to make sure that if we're going to make any decisions, we will look back at these values and go, if we make decision, if we choose A, are we going to be following any of these values? And this actually has been almost like our saving grace throughout the last year and a half we've been operating, and in all the decisions we've made. I'll walk you through that a little bit here. So honing in on today's talk, right? I could be telling you all about every mistakes that we've made in any of the events, from catering to ticketing to whatever. But that's like a whole day's worth of content. So in this next however long I have, I'm going to focus specifically on our values of being inclusive. Because what does it mean to be inclusive, right? There's many definitions, but if we follow the inclusive design principles, which was what I have here, this is like a very, if you look up inclusive design, usually you see the keywords of Microsoft, and you'll see something in this shape that turned out. Because Microsoft did back this very strongly. They do Xbox and things, and gaming and accessibility is a really big thing. They have very vested interest in making sure that, of course, their biggest operating system in the world is accessible and inclusive, but their gaming thing that makes a lot of money also really leads the way in here. So it's like a thought leadership thing that Microsoft did. But we see that there's usually different types of, I guess, like visible and invisible disabilities that we experience throughout our lives, and into different spectrum. I think this is why they call it the persona spectrum. There's many varieties to this, but there's an angle of people who are disabled in the way they can touch or feel things. So you have, like, as example, the permanent, if you, let's say, born without an arm, or you went to war, you came back, you lost a leg. It's a part of your the way you operate your body physically has been permanently damaged, or you can't do it anymore, damaged or not. You have temporarily, you broke your arm, you walk around, you can no longer use your dominant arm, but if I'm using a mouse, I might be typing a bit more slowly. So if your screen requires me to be like super specific about mousing things, then I would struggle to access or to use the tool you're creating. So that's kind of the idea, right? So like if we think of these particular scenario or spectrums, what can you, how difficult are the way you're designing your product, making it so that these type of users could or could not use it? So this is like a bit of an exercise, right? You could do a real quick run through, like, okay, I'm building this thing. We look through all the spectrums, and you will serve them well or not well in certain. And the thing, like, this whole thing is not to say, as soon as you do not cater for distracted driver, people who cannot see temporarily, your product fails. It's not that, right? It's like, well, based on the context of your product, let's say, if I think I gave an example during our mingle earlier, where if your product is focused on providing mental health service, then maybe the scenario of someone who's drunk trying to access your service on your app is a valid scenario. Where if I'm doing an accounting software, then would I build the software and try to cater for a drunken accountant going onto the budget sheet? Probably not, right? Probably not a scenario that I'm trying to do. But by considering it, you are then making a decision to exclude intentionally and say that is acceptable. Because we can't include everybody. The whole exercise is to go, right, let's flip that around. Let's not go, it's hard to include everybody, and go, if we're going to exclude certain groups or certain types or certain use cases, can we be intentional about that? Is there an alternative way they could operate or use your service or product or whatever? Is it a valid case? Well, everything's valid, but is it something that is acceptable? Is that an acceptable harm to the user, or the way we're disabling the user? So that's kind of something we're thinking about. So as we, again, honing in on our inclusiveness, if we're trying to be inclusive, then there's also the aspect of how do we make people feel welcome? So when they come to our space, they don't just see groups of people and then they can't come in. They don't know how to mingle with other people. How do we create spaces that are open, that people feel comfortable to move around? The speaker representation, they come in, they watch someone who maybe looks similar to them. They feel like they're a part of this conversations and presentations. So that's aspect of, like, once they're in here, they feel welcomed, but also, can they even access the tool? Is our ticketing system, can they use whatever it is we're trying to do? Is it too hard to access? Is the price within the range that they can access. Because if we're focused on, we're going to serve our community, because the problem we've identified, or one of them, is that a lot of us relied upon our company who we're working with to provide that bunch of buckets. So if your training costs $1,000 or conference costs $2,000, if your company is like a small digital agency and you're the only like designer or the only product owner in that company doing your project, they're not going to pay $2,000 for you to go to some conference or event. And so when we're designing where we go or what we do with our conferences, how we price it, we also consider what price range is still going to not be too profitable, but reasonable for us. Like there's just enough room for us to play with so that we can spend and pay people we want to pay for their fair work, while it's still somewhat affordable for as many people as we could make it. So that's kind of the spectrums and inclusions that we're kind of looking at here. Now, because we're trying to be different, right? Like lots of conferences, again, lots of community conferences in New Zealand, that's priced at the $200 range. 160 KawaiiCon was like $99. And so lots of conferences are in this middle range. They're not free, they're just this range. What sets us apart? How do we show that we're really, truly inclusive by we're not just saying we're inclusive by our value, we're showing it. And some of the ways we could do that very visibly is the way we provide information. If we exist to grow the New Zealand software community, then we're like, right, we need to, if we're going to publish video on the website, we need to have closed caption. Does the YouTube captions, is it sufficient for use cases? If you talk about engineering jargon or some product jargon or some software jargon, you have to go and hand edit that stuff. And so we've considered, right, so if you want to show that we're inclusive or accessible online, then this is how we do it, right? Having a proper caption, having transcription for the videos. But then how do we show that at the event itself on top of just having a diverse range of speakers? This is where we're like, right, we can do two things to make it super visible to the people attending our event that we are trying to be inclusive, or we're trying to create space for everyone with different abilities to come in. And so we can either do New Zealand Sign Language interpretation, or we could do the live captioning on the screen. Now we say or because it's our first year. We're bootstrapping. We have a fixed budget of all, if we, let's say, sell 80% of the tickets within reason, with this level of roughly sponsorship that we might get, this is how much budget we will have left over, and we could afford to allocate this much, this $2,000-ish for one or the other. Because these servers are expensive, right? Enter this, and the reason why we chose Inset Sign Language and not the live captioning text on screen is because it is the kind of inclusion that we're familiar with during the lockdown period. In all of those calls, you might be watching it on your YouTube screen and stuff, sure, but you're seeing the YouTube automated caption and you can choose to turn that off. So you might not even realize that you have that on. But the sign language in all the calls that we see, it was super visible all the time. Like if you're filming anyone, you will see that. And because when you see that, you feel like, oh, okay, so if I'm a New Zealand Sign Language user, I can always dial into these COVID calls because someone will be speaking to me in my language, in my preferred way of communicating. And because it's so visible, we want our event to do the same. How many text event that you see a sign language interpreter is on stage with a speaker? I haven't seen one in New Zealand, other than maybe one of the high-tech awards the other year. They managed to get that in. But that's it, right? That's so rare, especially for an event that charges like $100-something or $200. So we want that. You want that. It's like it sets the precedence for the next event we host, so that maybe more people who are New Zealand Sign Language users who went to university, they do study computer science. They are software developers. They do work in the tech industry. They just never have these events where they can go and listen to the content, or not listen, but like understand the content immediately. So how can we visibly show that space? And so that was our preference. If you have to spend between the live captioning on the screen in a way that we're not quite sure how to display at our venue, there was so many text issue going on, this is a much safer bet. We can so at the time, we asked our videographer to plan, right, here's the venue. We sent venue photo to our speaker. send it to our New Zealand Sign Language interpreter, the one who we're in the middle of booking, and we send it to our photographer and go, if we're taking photos, if we're taking or recording our speakers on stage, we want to make sure we frame the New Zealand Sign Language interpreter. Or if we can't, at least make sure that there's 2 cameras and it's set to, like, you've seen some floating box on the screen, so that there's picture of speaker, picture of slide, but also a very clear dedicated area to display the sign language interpreter. Before I move on though, it might not be, it seems like it's not commonly known, but New Zealand Sign Language is a different language. It is not a direct word-for-word translation of English or Te Reo Maori. There's a reason why there's 3 main languages in New Zealand, right? It's English, it's New Zealand Sign Language, it's Te Reo Maori. Because with sign language, you're not translating word for word, you're translating the intent. At least that's how as a beginner like myself, that's how I understand it. And it's a very colorful way of communicating. If you see people signing each other, they have lots of facial expression. They're also like they're not computing, like sometimes they have the really efficient way to communicate a concept in just 1 or 2 movements. They have a way to, like, sure, they can spell their name, how they spell their name, but they also have their sign name, so they can design their own sign name. So it's such a fascinating language and so interesting to look at, even if you don't understand it. That again creates that visibility and the clear message for inclusion for our events. So yes, here's why we're spending these kind of budget in, but the kind of preparation that goes in. So again, we all work 9 to 5. We're trying to do this 300 people event by June. We started the company in March. We're trying to cram all this in, including ticket sales, screening speakers, and all that stuff. But because I care enough about it, I'm like, cool, leave this aspect to me, and my co-founders deal with the speakers or the registration or the sponsorship effort. We're a division of labor. So I've clocked probably about 20 to 25 hours of preparation alone to prepare enough material so that the sign language interpreters have enough advanced materials from our speakers, example of their slides or their draft talks or something more, so that they can prepare to sign on the day. Because like all translation, right? If you ask someone who is not involved in tech at all or in software, and then on the day turn up and go, here's a speaker who's going to speak about DevOps or something really technical about this thing. How is this person going to come up and just sign, right? As a professional, of course, they'll ask for materials. But that means we're asking more from our speakers in our first year than a lot of other community conferences. So when we're scouting speakers, we had to ask for a slightly more experienced speakers, the speakers that we know we can trust to at least give our slides maybe a week, 2 weeks beforehand. I don't need complete talks, but enough context so that the sign language interpreters could prepare and do some research to sign your talk more accurately. Because once you sign, it's recorded. If they sign it wrong, then it's just wrong on the recording. So there's a sense of credibility for sign language interpreter as well, right? So even if we're thinking about inclusion for our audience, we also need to think about how do we manage and make this experience okay for our vendors, like the sign language interpreters too. Because there's only a few places in New Zealand that does the booking. So once you're burned one of the agency, you're pretty much on the blacklist of like any other sign language interpreters out there, similar to some accessibility service. Once you know one service and you've heard about a bad thing about one other service, you kind of, the rumor gets around. And so we're trying to avoid that too. But then, 2 weeks before the event, we had one of the sign language interpreters had to pull out. Now, because our event is an 8 hours long event, imagine if you're trying to translate for someone for 8 hours, that's too much. You can't, right? And so they costed us for 2 interpreters, and they can take turn resting. So one person signed for one speaker for half an hour or 40 minutes, and then another person comes up and signs for another. So that's arrangement. So if one person drops out, we might as well not have the sign language interpretation. And so what the agency tell us is that, well, one person dropped out, we could not find another interpreter to come in and sign your event who's Wellington based. We have to fly someone from Auckland. And we're like, all right, well, how much is that going to cost us? We budgeted this much. We gave like a 5% allowance for, plus minus this much, because we did ask for a quote beforehand. And now 2 days later, they sent me the quote. The cost jumped up by 50% because it has to include the transport cost of someone. And if they're coming from Auckland, they probably need to have accommodation, so that adds accommodation. There's also a distance charge and all that stuff. All those are fair, right? These are professional humans that we are paying to come all the way here to do this thing. And so at this point, I was like, inclusion, displaying to like showing that we care, that we're different, but also the cost involvement. We were actually discussing my co-founders and go, is this cost of 50% increase for this bucket worth it? Before we even made the decision, we're like, let's have a look at the situation. In our registration form, we have asked attendees to tick what access needs they might be requiring. So we asked if you need sign language or you need wheelchair spacing. We asked if you need live captioning. No one ticked any of those boxes. And because no one ticked any of those boxes, if we fly someone over from Auckland to come and sign, they're signing to a camera. They're coming all the way to Wellington to sign to a camera for us to publish online afterwards. The reason why sign language interpreter is so rare is because, again, it is a niche group. But when they are used, usually they're used for big events with big impacts, or they're used for critical services. COVID aside, like if someone who's a sign language user who can't speak go to a hospital, they need to quickly call someone in an emergency. And so for me, taking someone away from what they could have been spending their time on in Auckland, if there was an emergency, they could have been calling that. Maybe it's a different bucket, I don't know. But for me, I'm just like at least thinking like, what's the cost here? What am I, even if we can afford to pay it, is it the right way to spend our money, and does it serve the right people? If there's no one there live at our event who needs this, do we need to fly someone over? Is there something else we could do? And so we're like, as much as we would love this to make a statement out of this, no, it's not worth it. It is not worth someone's time to come over to us and then perhaps wasting further time for them to fly all the way, even if we pay them extra time. It's just those could be critical service. They could be serving someone else at the hospital in Auckland. And so we're like, okay, switch track then. We're going to cancel this. It's within our agreement because the cost just increased, shot up way too much. Usually would pay a deposit and it's gone, but because this is a special case, like their interpreter pulled out, so we came to an agreement. We then asked, all right, cool. So in that case, I know you have a translation service where you actually have a whole crew of like, here, we give you the content, here's a video. You've actually created video of an interpreter signing properly, and it's well framed, and it's like, and they have time to do it accurately, and it's a professional service that they do. It's a translation service, not interpretation, where it's live and might be room for error. This is a translation where it's be translating exactly. Is that a viable thing? So I got transferred to a different service in their branch. And I told them, here's our scenario, here's our intent. And they were like, frankly, it's going to be even more expensive than flying someone over, because there's a whole aspect of, yes, even if they have a studio, even if they have a green screen, they still need to do editing afterwards. They need to do more research than the interpreter would have been able to do. And the video would have been dedicated for the NZSL community only, and it wouldn't be applicable for any other community. And so we'll be splitting the crowd. Let's say if you're watching a speaker on the video, it'll be a video of a speaker. They either have to edit in the interpreter, which is an extra edit cost, or it's a video with just the interpreter, maybe the slide at the back, and cut out the speaker. Neither of them sound very good to me. And so looking at that, they also said, look, if your target audience are software people, many of them would graduate computer science, the person who was communicating with me said, look, they finished computer science from Vic. They're deaf. They know there exists a community, but things in order for them to go through Vic University with the way the system is, they have to be literate in English anyway. They have to be, because it's a technical crowd, that all the documents, how they learn how to code and do software and do these technical things, they're all written in English. And so they're already, a lot of them, or our target audience, a lot of them already know how to read and consume English content or learn from English content. And so as long as we have an accurate caption afterwards or at the event, that should be fine. Like for this target audience, not as visible, but it will serve the purpose. It will provide inclusive content. And so we're like, okay, cool. Thank you for your advice and for saving us another $3,000. We're gonna switch track. We're gonna switch our bucket from paying NZSL interpreter, switching it to paying a live caption service. Now, the reasons why we're avoiding the live caption service is because it's a complicated setup. I mean, today we're doing a live stream here with 2 screens, dialing in with technology and stuff. But because I know the setup, I have access to the setup to play with all the time. Well, not all the time, but 9 to 5. But then at the venue, Vic University, I can't just rock up and then plug my laptop in without telling the venue coordinator. It takes about 3-4 weeks for venue coordinator to respond back because they're busy with other critical things like making sure their students have rooms to study in, rather than an event that's paid outside of university hours. So we're like, okay, cool. We'll make sure we'll do a pre-rehearsal and then we'll do a rehearsal. So fast forward from 2 weeks before the event, when that was cancelled, we had now 1 week before the event. We've asked Vic, can you please have an hour to go to your venue, plug things in, check if we understand the sound, we understand how many microphone works and all that good stuff. So this is not just for accessibility reasons, it's just a general tech check. So included as a part of tech check, we've then arranged a practice run with the people who will be doing live captioning. Now, the fun things about live captioning here is that there's, as far as I know, there isn't many services where there's a stenographer who would be typing on their keyboard, listening to live thing, and then displaying it on the screen. That's not a common thing that events ask for, and therefore in New Zealand it doesn't really exist unless it's inside the courtrooms or those kind of services. So we have to use an Australian service. Fine. In the name of making things right, we're going to go and use this Australian service that is used by a lot of other events overseas who are sued for accessibility reasons. And so we contact them, we arrange them to hop on this call at this exact time. They're at the university. We're going to test things out to see whether they can first, can the people in Australia listening to the call in the room could hear people speaking so that they can then type out the caption for us. So there's 2 aspects to this, right? Can they hear the thing and can we display what they're typing? And so we had a test. At Vic, we had a big room, right? This is the front stage here. We had 2 options at the time. We were like, right, we have an option 1 of doing the floating display. So on top of, so if the speakers have the slides open, we can then display the caption as text in a smaller box away from where the speakers usually have their elements, top right, top left, somewhere in the bottom. So this would be a common occurrence in, let's say, when you're watching YouTube, when you're watching the subtitles at the bottom, right? So this is it's not a new thing. Like the position of this is something that we've seen all the time. And so that's a valid option. So that's option 1. And then we have option 2. And this is only because Vic has 2 gigantic screens next to each other that we could, in theory, display slide on only 1 screen and display the caption in another screen. So we're like, okay, cool, we could do option 2. And that would, again, if we want the statement, this would give us the bigger statement because in any photos, you see the slides and then you see the text written on the screen. But we're like, oh, now that we're looking at the way the slides work, the way, as we're testing out, as Kemi is speaking, and the live captioner from Australia can hear well and they can type well, we're like, you know what? The way they're typing, they're only able to type maybe a short sentence at a time. There's never going to be a long, like YouTube 3-paragraph text. And so they don't need all that gigantic space, really, to display all the text. So at the time, we're like, right, this is a week before. We made an executive decision to only display text the way you would usually see it in the videos, where we display in a small area dedicated to do it. Now, in order for us to do this, we actually have to dial into a Zoom call. Dial both. So we're at the room here. We show presentation on the screen. We dial the room into the Zoom call. So we make sure the sound goes into the Zoom call, and we invite the live captioner on the other end to listen in on the Zoom call. And so they're seeing the slides being transitioned as speakers are speaking. But yeah, it is a bit of a rig because there's no, like, the ideal solution, or the ideal scenario would be there's something pre-built. It's like one screen would have the slide projection at the top, and then a very dedicated split out black box to display the text in a nice way. So it never blocks the speaker slide or anything like that. So that's the ideal scenario. But because this is a low-tech setup in university, you can't really do that unless you know how to do audio-visual switching and things like that, which we don't have the capacity to do. So we went with option 1. And we're like, cool, we're comfortable. The live captioners could hear us well. We have some relatively accurate stuff. We're good. We're comfortable with the way we're setting up. And so, of course, we had the rehearsal the day before. And this is where, we're doing fun stuff like making sure the chairs are arranged in a nice way. And we have one of those 2 volunteers who we haven't worked with before optionally come to us and just to help us see what the venues look like, set up and test. At this point, we actually asked, by this point, we have all the speaker slides, or at least the latest version they can before the day. And we were testing them on our projections to make sure that they're accessible. The text-wise, the contrast is good. The size is good. If the size wasn't good or the contrast was low, we provide recommendations to the speaker. So we were really hands-on with what the speakers, if they did provide us in advance, we were really hands-on with what they provided us and advice accordingly. And we showed them the screen, like, look, your slide has this level of contrast. It's very hard to see. Here's a photo of why it's hard to see from the room itself. So you can see what the audience is going to see. So we've tried our best here, making sure that things are right day before. On the day itself, this is where shit gets real. The 7th of July last year. This is a screenshot of our final published recording on YouTube of our keynote talk. This is the first slide of our keynote. And if you can see my current screens right now, you will see that the slide said Kiwiana and code, and then W, and there's a black box of what we have as a live caption box that we were trying to display to the audience, blocking the speaker slide because we didn't expect the speaker would have anything at the bottom of their slide. We just assumed all speakers would have things at the top and the left. Of course, we didn't communicate to the speakers that we were going to show live caption in this way. And so, of course, they didn't design their slides in the way that would allow for these things to not block their content. But it's very embarrassing to see in a keynote speaker. But that's fine. All good. Then what hurts more is that, sure, the other one was the opening slide of our keynote. And it's OK. She could speak, she's already speaking the content on the slide. So if you can't see the text on the slide, that's fine, you could skip it. In this scenario, she was referring to a white dog at the bottom of her screen. And the live caption box was exactly on top of that dog character that she was referring to as an example, a reference of something as a part of her talk. That's bad. Now we're blocking speaker content. Very embarrassing. And this is burnt into our YouTube video afterwards because our videographer has a setup where he filmed the thing as we display it to the user, and then we already provide the background for our branding for him. And so that's why he was able to provide us with this video or all these videos the next day, because he's already filming it as if this is a live stream. So he got it all rigged up. But that means what you see is what you get. If the audience got their slides blocked, it's burnt into our video recording. It's lovely. Now, that was fine. That was our keynote. Then we hit the next speaker, who is a very dynamic speaker, lots of activities like walking around. So we have a black box that not only block the slide content, it also says inaudible for the 30 minutes talk that he was giving. This hurts. Oh, this was embarrassing. Because if the scenario of the first speaker was just like, oh, it's blocking the content, then we could have gone with option 2, right? We had 2 screens. We could have dedicated the other screen, go back to the option of displaying the live caption on the other screen then, so it doesn't block the speaker's slides in this way. But now that we hit the second speaker, who are back-to-back, so we don't have time to make that adjustment, as soon as he walked away, they couldn't hear it. But that's because the room sound doesn't come in via the mic that they're speaking in. The room sound that goes to the Zoom call comes in by the laptop. And there was no way to route the room sound from the sound system of the Victoria University room into a laptop that doesn't belong to the university's computer. They lock that down. Security reasons, all that stuff. I don't want people plugging into your ports and ruining your system. Either way, it means you don't have our live caption does not have access to what the audience in the room could hear very well, because speaker projects very well, there's good microphone and all that good stuff. And so we have this scenario. And so if we dedicate a whole screen to display the caption, we will see inaudible, 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 2 words, inaudible, for the rest of the conference. So we're like, nope, screw it. At this point, we cut our losses. We're just going to stick to this not great solution. But this, if we show it on a separate screen, that would have been more damage to both our reputation and the sense of we welcome people who cannot hear to come to our conference. It would make it even worse. And so we got stuck with this. Now, of course, in all the other aspects, as Lena, who's helping us, was helping us the other day, could say, it was fun, right? People were taking photos. There were good contents, good conversations, decent food. People were fed, had drinks, all that good stuff. So people were relatively happy. We had a nice closing end, and it's all at least there's some good things about this. But afterwards, our team was like, a real mixed feelings, eh? We almost sold out. We did get the sponsors. We had like a smidget of profit left over to spend more on this year's stuff. So by all standard measures of business, we've succeeded. With our first event, our speakers spoke, no one dropped out, all the stuff we have it recorded. But if we truly want to say we're inclusive, none of what happened really give anyone that confidence that we could really create an inclusive event for the next one. We might be able to do it from representation. So at least if you're not disabled in any way, then you've seen people of a variety of colors, variety of sexes on our stages. Fine, tick the box there. But in terms of truly welcoming the disabled community, didn't do much there. And so sum total, right, at the end, we have catered for 0 New Zealand Sign Language users. We have catered for 0 wheelchair user. No one turned up, maybe because, for multiple reasons. We can retro that later on. And of course, negative impression for people who need the live caption. And the people who need live caption for, by the way, it's not just people who perhaps cannot hear. Like second language speakers or people who are new to the terminologies being used at the conferences would have benefited from a nicely spelled out, correctly spelled out text on the screen. So, because sometimes they do explain the context of what the speaker was talking about as well. Like if there's an inside joke or an inside reference to some TV show, sometimes they helpfully say the name of this, and then it's a bracket TV show as well. So a truly good interpreter and the stenographer or live captioner, if they have enough materials to work with beforehand, they could even provide more context for our users on the day. Because they didn't do that, we had all those issues, negative live caption users. So how do we recover from this? We're like, right, we did not meet our goal, but we had some good things going. Do we just give up? Do we just give them this aspect and go, we're inclusive by other means, the DEI minus the disability bit of it, just like all the other DEI programs in lots of countries, right? We're like, oh, we're inclusive, we're rainbow communities, and then we just ignore the disability community. Very common way to run DI programs around. Do we just do that for the time being because we're low budget, it's our first year or second year this year, and we just have 3 people, we're not full-time yet, and all that good stuff? Can we use the starting out new as an excuse to, I guess, like compromise a little bit on our values? But before that, there's other things to wrap up. We're like, okay, well, in order for us to redeem ourselves a little bit here, let's at least make sure the recordings or the final things that we push out to the community, the materials that we've got from the conference, is at least minimally acceptable. It's accessible in the standards that lots of people would be able to benefit from. If they didn't come to our conference, they can watch our video. There are multiple ways to access it, by sound, by writing, by caption, whatever. Like, what can we do here to redeem ourselves a little bit? And so, of course, 4 weeks later, the 3 of us split up the number of videos we have, and we hand edited all the freaking subtitles on the YouTube video. Of course, we didn't write it from scratch. We did upload it to YouTube. YouTube would generate automatic caption. But then we talked like Alicia, where she started off with a lot of Te Reo Māori, which is in her right. That's one of the reasons why I invite her, because she's such a prominent figure in this advocacy work, but still speaking in open source, which is a unique angle to it. There's no way YouTube is going to be able to translate that stuff. So this is a lot of, hey, Alicia, the thing you said, is this the right spelling that I spelled it right? Because I'm still very new to this too. But at least we were able to ensure after 4 weeks of churning through, reviewing all the automated caption for all the 30 minutes videos, that they have as accurate as we could make it as, again, software engineers who are trying to do the right things. We're not professionals here. We've also managed, you can't read this, but this is the level of information we provide underneath our videos. The chapters, so that if you want to skip through, it's very easy to do. We also really care about references, because if all these are educational materials, so people who might not be able to afford coming to our conference and they still want to learn from these speakers, here's the materials that they mentioned, they linked, any additional things, and we provide them on here. We also make sure that there is transcript on our website. Of course, there's a selfish SEO element to this too. So if someone's searching up something about DevOps or whatever, there would be links straight to our speakers page because it's good SEO juice. But at least we have the readable, accurate, or reasonably accurate transcription of the speaker's talk on our website in a way that is readable with the resources. So this is how we kind of redeemed ourselves a little bit here and makes us feel a little bit better about it. But we're still demoralized, right? Is this worth spending about $2,500, $3,000 again to risk this level? Is it worth it? Is this enough? Is what we've done with the recording afterwards enough to show we care as much as we could with the resources we have? And we're like, no, we want to take another bet. This bet failed in 2023. But we want to try again, maybe just one more time, or maybe 2 more times. We have 2 events this year. So 2 more times this year to see whether we could still try to make it work and pioneer that. It shouldn't be a pioneering effort, but it is, that we have live caption, we have insert as our interpreter on stage with our speakers, showing that we care and making sure that the event's accessible for all. But in that case, how do we do it? How do we what can we learn from the things that we did not do? We, of course, have 2 different checklists. We have the checklist for insert SL interpretation, and we have a checklist for live caption, because both of them failed in different ways earlier last year. We, of course, made sure that we couldn't afford 50% increased budget. We're still not going to allow for someone flying over just to live caption our event, but we will at least increase the amount of budget that we might need, maybe to go with an agency or to allow for last minute pulling someone in, locally speaking. Because there are more than one agency. We were just that last year we were so short on time that we could not even have time to start working or establishing a relationship with another agency. So this year we're giving us the time. We're booking this real early. So if someone did pull out, I already have a list of 3 other agencies that I could kind of potentially contact and pull in last minute if all else fails. And of course, the last thing is, last time we would have still fly someone over if there was one deaf person or one NZSL interpreter, NZSL user in the audience. It would have still be worth flying someone over that one person. But because there wasn't anyone, it wasn't worth it. So for us, the bar says we need to make sure that we at least promote it. This is marketing 101, right? You create this wonderful product. You want your customers to come. You did not tell your customer that they could use it. And so of course they're not going to come. And historically, they've never had an event where they could turn up to and enjoy like everybody else. And so this time, as we're booking into the sound interpretation, we're also asking, hey, you people who serve this community, can you please also tell us where you dwell? Can you tell your community about it? Like, at least that it's okay. We will make sure that this service is available for you if someone did want it. Because otherwise, ordinarily speaking, if the NZSL user really wanted to go to a certain event or a workshop and the organizer did not provide it, they will have to go through some budget hoops to require assistance from the government or some agencies or whatever to get their own personal interpreter in there. And they might do that optionally, but for them to there's a lot of effort for them to just turn up for a day event, right? Where they could have watched a recording after. And so if we can make it easier for them by still providing that proactively, hopefully that would encourage more people to come. But again, promoting in the deaf community is key. So I'm in the middle of emailing them back now, like, yes, please, can you please send me the links to the community or tell me the best way to communicate with them? So I'm working on it at the moment, and we have a good 3 months before the event. So we're making for good time here. For live caption checklists, now because we had some leftover money from last year, we bootstrapped, we have some profit. So we can afford to spend a little bit more. So this year we're going to try both. We're going to try to have both NZSL and live captioning. And the thing is, like, I could wait and leave the live captioning to maybe a later event when I'm more technically savvy and things like that. But if I look at this in the Big Rock perspective, I don't know if you know the concept of Big Rock, but usually when people talk about problem solving of projects, they would give you an example of like a glass jar. And if you're solving small problems, you're filling in sand, then yeah, sure, you can fill the jar with sand. But by the time you hit halfway through and you still have big rocks, big problems left to solve, there's no more room in that glass jar to solve that problem. You are out of resources, out of time, out of whatever. So the idea of solving the big rocks first is solve your chunkiest problem first, because they're the one who would determine whether you fail or succeed. Solve that problem, and then add the other medium-sized loose rocks and whatever. So that's the concept we're following. And I personally felt that the live captioning in ZSL, they're the big rocks here. We might need to solve this in the future, but if we solve that now, we know we can do it from now on. We know how much more budget we need, so we're going to keep persevering. And that's the drive for us. If we solve this now, we will save ourselves in the future. No matter which venue we go to, we would be able to go through. So we budgeted. We also need to make sure that we send the room sound over. So this time when we do pre-rehearsal, we're gonna walk away from the stage and test whether the live captioner could hear, or perhaps give them a headphone, or work with our videographer to route what he's recording straight to the Zoom call rather than dialing the computer Zoom call in. There's multiple ways we can do that. So I'm going to be working closely with our videographer to find a way or solution to send this sound. We also, of course, if we can be confident that the live caption is reasonably accurate, then we could afford to spend a whole screen on it and not block the speaker slide. That's the best we could do with Victoria University at the moment. But at the end of the year, with New Zealand Tech Rally Conference, where we're scaling up in terms of size, we're going to be at Takina. And that's a brand new conference center. And I've already told, hey, you have sound audio engineer technician there. I'm going to use you, and you're going to make sure that there's a way to display live caption in a separate thing from the slide. That's what I'm asking. So we'll see how that goes in the year. But for Vic, hopefully we're going to try to do it on a separate screen. We're also going to budget for afterwards. So this is a live caption of the event, right? But afterwards, there'll be some cleanup to do. Like some live caption might be missing some spellings or certain things. So we might need to budget for either an amateur again or someone professional to help clean that up, so that we are not sitting down for like 8 hours for a video as co-founders trying to edit the live captioning our video. That was draining for some of our co-founders, and we do not want to be doing that again if we can help it by ourselves. Because again, we're not sure whether the quality was at the level that professionals could have given us. We do our best, but we cannot guarantee. So we would love that guarantee if possible. And of course, if you look at our website now, the transcript, if it's for a half an hour call, that's like this kind of long of this length text, right? That's a lot of text. There's ways to design the layout, maybe add speaker slides, and to make the reading experience more engaging. Because if the person opted to read the transcript, chances are they're not watching the video. They could be, but a lot of times they might just be able to skim. They found skimming through text is a lot easier. In that case, how do we design that layout to allow better for people who prefer to consume blog posts or things by written content? So those are the kind of improvements that we're thinking of. And so wish us luck. And if you want to know if we succeeded, you can either watch our videos afterwards or come to our conferences. The tickets on sale for testing conference now. But otherwise, yeah, I hope we can succeed in at least one of the rocks that we set out to do, and hopefully not demoralize ourselves by the end of it again.
Awesome. Thanks, Prae. That was super interesting. As a product person, what I took away from that was don't be afraid to shoot for amazing, and even if it doesn't work out, you're going to learn heaps. And when you see the next set of things you're going to do, it's going to be even better than it was had it worked perfectly the first time, right? And so, yeah, learn from things that don't go well. And
talk to the community you're trying to serve, right? We didn't talk to the deaf community, and so it's only because we talked to them that we came to the decision of, oh, maybe not a translation service, or maybe it's not sensible to fly someone over, or maybe we should advertise this year.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. Hey, thank you very much. Round of applause again, and thanks for coming. Stream. Is it off? By stream.